And whether it is a global trigger event or a personal trigger event, it matters not. They are confrontational moments in your life that dive you into the depths and the core of beginning to stand up for something, your set of values, and realign you back to your core truth. On our earth plane, we have been, a militarized planet for a long time, but it's just really being shown to us more and more and more because, of course, we have accessibility via the internet. We have accessibility via social media. There's nowhere to run away. You cannot turn your head anymore. Essentially, what it is about self-exploration, not to heal the thing. The byproduct of the self-exploration allows you to reach a state of self-empowerment. And then from there, you are back in the captain's seat of your ship.
Greetings, seekers of ancient wisdom. Today, we're covering a very relevant topic as the planet goes through an ascension. It is trigger events, triggering you into spiritual awakening. So to uncover this very interesting topic, I've got a very experienced shaman, Brigitte Heeb, to help us discuss this very, very deep and necessary discussion around this topic. So Brigitte, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Deepak. I'm thrilled to be here, and I look forward to the series of podcasts that unfold. Yeah, diving deeper into topics with a little bit more time, I think will be super helpful for the viewers and listeners.
Excellent. So Brigitte, let's dive straight into it. So what are trigger events triggering people into a spiritual awakening? Maybe give us a better understanding of what that means.
Beautiful. So I guess I'll start with a story. Has anyone ever had something happen in their lives? And I think the easiest one to kind of latch onto is maybe your first love and a breakup, the breakup of your first love kind of vibe. So these are called trigger events. And not only do we have them on a personal level within our individualized experiences, within our individualized consciousness, in our reality fields, but we also have them as collective consciousness. So we have certain trigger events that are happening in and throughout our earth fields, our earth planes, that are going to trigger a sort of domino effect. So we start linking into cause and effect here. And when one has such a trigger event, whether it is personalized in your individualized consciousness, or whether we are experiencing it together as a collective, these are called trigger events. So, I guess at this point I could, without diving deep into the topic, which we'll go into in this session, but, I could really ask you to sit and take a breath in, and without much thought, you could pretty much, I think, quite automatically come to big events in your life that have created big shifts and changes that we call a trigger event. And often these events are viewed as negative from the perception of the experiencer. They're usually difficult experiences that we would perceive as negative. And I think today's conversation is to really, delayer this and take the armor away from that which we describe as chaotic in our lives or destructive in our lives, and really just peel the onion layers back to observe that these events are actually there to catapult you through a process that we would call your spiritual awakening or further initiations along the path. So I hope that's explained it succinctly, sufficiently, and effectively.
So I just wanted to understand it a bit better. So a trigger event is something perhaps that's traumatic that creates an emotional charge that gets blocked in the body, perhaps that doesn't leave the body. So an event that results in that emotional charge, is that what is a trigger event? And then you're saying that creates a domino in many cases that has other events linked to it, and that could potentially result in people having a spiritual awakening.
Correct, yes. So again, the charge in the body needs to be released. That release would happen through a set of emotions, so we're in recognition of a set of emotions, and the emotions are usually on the negative spectrum of the emotional scale, if you want to call it that, because how the spirit or soul works to a certain degree is to highlight aspects of your life and your reality that are not in coherence. So essentially, it's highlighting those aspects of your life that you need to look at that are not in alignment, that are causing you pain. And usually it's going to ask you to move through that pain through a series of healing or emotional release, to release the charge that is sitting in the mental body, that is sitting in the emotional body. It needs to be released. And why people resist this is because even though we can clearly see that, let's say, our soul or spirit is presenting this aspect to us to look at, something that is not in alignment, our mental body may have tricked us into believing a different story. So we resist these events and we kind of hold on to what we have at any point in time. And it's also because there's such an influx of information at this moment. And our lives are hard. Life is not that easy for everybody on planet Earth. So now to be presented with something we need to look at, meaning to look at our shadow aspects, to look at that which is actually causing pain, to look at that which is not or no longer in alignment, to look at something and begin to question it, is sometimes too much for an individual. And so we'll go back into our old patterns and we'll just ignore this aspect for a while. And it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until, it needs to erupt. The charge needs to be released. The charge needs to be released. And and this is why, your soul aspect, your higher soul aspect, your higher self is going to bring you these situations for you to look at and to clear. And this is what clearing work is in energy work or shamanic work. It's hard work. It's going through the abyss, the layers of hurt and pain and suffering that we sometimes don't have time to do, or that we don't want to, because it is confrontational. It's really, really confrontational. And whether it is a global trigger event or a personal trigger event, it matters not. They are confrontational moments in your life that dive you into the depths and the core of beginning to stand up for something, your set of values, and realign you back to your core truth. So let's say it is a relationship that you need to look at that is not in alignment. You are aware of it in the depths of your soul. You're aware of it. But the ego aspects of you, the wounded aspects of you, the forever spiritual student in you still needs to gather lessons from that experience. And so you're not quite ready to let go of it. And so you basically deceive yourself. There's cognitive dissonance that occurs, so that you stay in there. You want it to work, and you create in your mind a whole set of reasons why, it's not time yet to exit this relationship. But the higher self is going to keep at you, and whether this is in dream space or whether it's physically manifesting in your reality, your partner may be snapping at you. You are spending time being more unhappy than you are happy in your relationship. These are things you need to look at and begin to shift the energy. So the confrontational aspect of trigger events, I think, is quite an important thing to look at. Can we avoid confrontation? Because most people want to do that, but it's for a peace that is not quite a peace. It's a lie. It's a personal lie to the self. So we avoid things to stay in a peaceful zone, and we just want peace. We don't want drama, but we've got to go in there. And this is why spiritual work is so difficult, and it's so confrontational.
So I wanted to unpack a few things you mentioned. So this charge is sitting in the emotional body, right? So something happens traumatic and it creates an emotional charge. And emotion is actually energy in motion, right? Emotion. And it wants to flow. Energy always wants to flow, right? But I guess when this charge is created and people have this traumatic experience, they hold that charge somewhere in their body. And then these trigger events are showing you the charge that is still trapped in your body. That's the trigger, right? So it's like triggering something that's already sort of a blockage and then making you aware of it. Like, okay, hey, listen, you have this issue, this problem that needs to be dealt with or integrated, or a lesson that needs to be understood. So I guess what you're saying is the universe brings these situations to you. So whether it's your partner snapping at you or other experiences, it's brought to you to address.
And please note, that the trauma that you speak of may not have occurred within that dynamic that you're currently being shown. The trauma may be from, your younger years, your childhood years. Your trauma may be from a quote unquote past or parallel reality. The reason I say quote unquote, and you'll hear me correct this throughout the series, is that for me, I'm really involved in the teachings of the law of one. So I may say certain things that allow the mind to understand the storyline, but I will always correct because I don't want to superimpose misinformation on you. So within the law of one, there is no past, present, or future, but for the sakes of this conversation, that trauma may be from a past reality, a different timeline, a different dimensional experience, as well as having experienced that trauma in this incarnation, which needs to clear through this particular constellation you are dealing with at the moment. And again, please remember your trigger events. It's like we are dealing with so much on the planet at the moment because there are so many trigger events. So we can see them as many, many timelines, all with triggers on them. So there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide anymore, whether it's happening in your personal space with, whether it's happening in your personal space or whether it's in the collective. And I think it's supercharged at the moment because the earth in, our planetary body is going through so much. And we as emotional beings are connected. We are interdependently connected within the one and the whole. And so our personal lives may be looking like a bit of a shit show at the moment because what your higher self or the higher aspects of you are trying to do is say, hey, there's so much happening on the planet at the moment that you've got to look at your own personal stuff, because if you don't start looking at the charges within your personal aspects, what begins to happen on the planet, you are really going to struggle to integrate, because it's not going anywhere. It's just getting a bigger and bigger charge. There's a bigger and bigger force that we are being asked to look at from a humanitarian aspect and from a planetary aspect, that you better start looking at your personal trigger events efficiently, effectively, and timeously. The time is now.
So what happens? I mean, like you said, people are if people are going to struggle if they don't listen to their trigger events and go and do the work, because I guess the trigger event is like a signpost, an alarm, and saying, hey, you need to go and deal with this emotional charge. But then you actually need to go and do the work, which is maybe doing a ceremony, or there's meditative work, breath work. There's many different avenues, and you actually have to go put the time in and do the work. And it might take many sessions. It might take many months, many hours, of intense dedication. And I think that's maybe what people are afraid to do, or don't have time to do, don't prioritize. And this is, you're saying that now they can't run anymore. If you haven't prioritized to now, you are going to be forced to prioritize. Or what happens if they don't?
Well, what happens if they don't is an even bigger trigger event, right? So, if we look at our global landscape at the moment, we have huge trigger events being, shown to us. We have wars left, right, and center. Of course, if we go deeper into history, we begin to understand that these wars we have been warring in the galactic sense for eons, for millions and millions of years, right? But let's bring it down to Earth. On our Earth plane, we have been, a militarized planet for a long time, but it's just really being shown to us more and more and more, because of course we have accessibility via the internet, we have accessibility via social media. There's nowhere to run away. You cannot turn your head anymore. So you said, what happens if we don't do it? Is just the confrontation in front of you is just going to get bigger and louder and noisier, and it's going to become all consuming. And the reason for that is, we could say, very religiously inclined people would say, but how could God do this? Why is God showing me all of this? I don't want to see this pain and suffering. But what it's doing inevitably is opening your heart. It's like cracking the nut. You've got to come out of that shell that you are keeping around you to keep you protected, in order to not feel. We have to begin to feel. And so like I said, it just becomes louder. It becomes more present. It becomes more prevalent. And the danger of that is, if we continue to ignore, we move into nervous system shutdown. Or, depending on your soul path and depending on what it is that your consciousness wishes to experience, you could move through a massive expulsion of the energy, which we would call a charge, being expelled, that we could call a kundalini rising. And if that kundalini rising is expelling this force of trauma and this force of energy in in an eruptive way, because you've been ignoring, you haven't been doing the work, and it's just like, shit, it needs to come out now. This begins to happen, and you may, and more than likely, have high potential to move into a big expanding experience that we would call a psychosis. And this is increasing and rising on the planet at the moment, because, your question was, what happens if we ignore it? But prior to chatting about that, you were saying, people need to do the work and they're not prioritizing. I think the thing is, we've got to begin to understand is that I don't even think people are aware of reading their reality in this kind of way. It seems to me that we're still really at the basics. And the basics are, hey, do you value your emotional state of being? And if the answer is yes, then I could say, well, then inevitably you would value the spiritual aspects of your life. You would begin to value your belief systems, or at least ask yourself questions around your belief systems. pertaining to religion, spirituality, faith, trust, love, the values that create a beautiful humanity on this planet, or just in your family unit. What are your values, and are you out of alignment to them? Because the reason people are not able to prioritize this is they are already in their cube structures, right? And their cube structure, little boxes on the hillside, is I work hard, I pay my taxes, I'm here to pay my rent or my bond, I've got the kids, I've got school, we've got education, I'm just got to grind it down for the next 30 years so that the bond is paid. I've got my medical aid, so if anything happens, and that's it. We're just in the cube, and we don't have time, nor do we have the energy to prioritize the emotional body through the awakening and questioning of what is meaningful to us as a spiritual being, as a being that is spirit, that is energy. So we don't ask ourselves existential questions. And through this sort of cube reality that we're existing in, how we then move to fixing certain issues is quick fixes, right? Quick fixes that often look like antidepressants, because what is happening? The emotions are being shown. We're being shown our shadow through the trigger events. We can't cope because we don't have time to prioritize. We don't have time to look at it. So we move to quick fixes. And as you said, the work, you said, may take weeks, may take months. In fact, when you dive into this and really begin to commit to really understanding oneself, it is a lifetime of commitment to the path. Some of us more, embodied on that path than others. We all have different objectives, different things we want to learn on this plane. So, not everyone is going to go into a path like mine. Mine is pretty intense based on what I wish to learn and how I wish to explore my consciousness. And this is why for the regular person, the trigger events are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because we are shifting from a material reality, so this cube structure, into a new age, a new age where the spirit and God, our understanding of God, needs to be quite clear within our consciousness. So there's a lot of information there. Let's see where we go next within your questioning.
So I really like to explore a bit more about the actual trigger event. So I think people, like you mentioned about the quick fixes, people want the quick fix because that's what they're trained to do. I mean, the whole way we're brought up is that if I don't feel good, I go to the doctor, he gives me a pill. And what does the pill actually do? Sort of like an antidepressant. Like an antidepressant has a very powerful chemical, and some of them, for instance, inhibit serotonin uptake, for instance, right? Serotonin is a very important hormone that's produced by the body, manages your emotional balance, but now they sort of shut that off. So their way of treating it is to sedate the event. So it's like, okay, person has a trigger event, and if you work within the cube, you trigger event gets sedated, right? So it's like, okay, hey, take this pill, your trigger event will go away for a while.
Yes, let's try Control-Alt-Delete the event. Hello Austria, how are you doing? I am back from my tours to Lithuania and South Africa, where I've been doing quite a lot of ceremony work. I just wanted to pop in and say hello. As per any experiences that you've had with me, I kind of want to allow you an opportunity to come into deeper work with me for those of you that are interested. Essentially, I have a coaching container that I am completing soon on the 8th of April, and the new one will be opening in a couple of months' time. This is a really, really deep dive into spiritual technology, metaphysics, multidimensionality, consciousness, healing, ancestral work, light work, shadow work, light language, voice activation, embodiment, breath work, nervous system work, really understanding your spiritual role here on planet Earth as we work together as a shield, like the mushrooms, like the mycelial, in order to raise our own frequency as well as the frequency of the planet. So this coaching container is very, very powerful for those of you who are interested in this kind of work, shifting your consciousness, understanding your reality, what is happening here on Earth, what is your part to play. This is a really, really beautiful opportunity. And we do a lot of meditation. We do a mixture between energy work and teaching. So the mind is activated. There are practical aspects that we go through as well. So it's really a nice balance of energy work and coaching. If you are interested, please do get hold of me. I don't want you to worry too much about any language aspects, because a lot of the stuff we are just sitting and observing how energy is moving. And there are diagrams that can assist you in what it is we're doing in terms of the content. Those of you that don't know or need a reminder, I work within the law of one, and this is the basis of my teachings. 950 billion years of information, of ancient teachings, and really just a reminder of who you are from this heart space. So again, I say hello. Please touch base with me if you are interested in this type of long format coaching. It'll be around 6 to 7 months. And yeah, I hope you're doing well. I'm sending lots of love. Ciao.
Correct. Or switch off the alarm, or just put it on silent so you don't hear it. But now, how does this actually get bigger? Is it because the planet is going through an ascension, that there's more energy, that the event, your trigger is going to get bigger? Well, how does this now get like more? Because you say it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger if people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the easiest way to answer is if you take pretty much majority, almost 99.9999999% of souls on the planet who are, for example, on antidepressants, antipsychotics, etc., and ask them, is this working for you? Is this solution working for you? I could pretty much guarantee you that 99.9999999% of them would say, no, my medication is not assisting me. You know, I think Western medication is a great, as you mentioned, you know, maybe it'll switch the alarm bell, you know, it's just like, you know, maybe we can just tone that down so the nervous system can come into rest, right? And this is, you know, so if someone's died in your family, your whole entire reality has shifted. It's a massive trauma to the body. I understand in those moments where Western medication to turn those alarm, you know, the sirens and everything, to hush it down, to allow the body to rest and sleep, and maybe not even antidepressants, but maybe sedatives or something like that, just to allow the nervous system to rest, right? Because we've got all sorts of hormones going through the body, and adrenaline spiking, and because we're now in a fear state, you know, someone we love has passed away. So to allow the nervous system to rest is a smart idea. But, you know, we open the show with ancient wisdom. That aspect of wisdom is missing in our culture. And it's because we've been shut off from source. It's because we've stopped asking ourselves questions about existentiality. It's because we've stopped being adventurous minds, because we've grown up in an education system that has literally funneled us into systems of production. And dare I say it, slavery, right? There has been no room within the cube to think otherwise. So we've lost this aspect of our beautiful mental body to think, critically thinking. We've lost that, and that critical thinking brings wisdom. So how does it increase when we are doing these things? So I was speaking about the medication, and I think it's such an easy one because, again, and the viewers are welcome to comment here, if you are on any medication, has it been assisting you? Perhaps, it was a nice plaster on the wound. We're not taught to look at our field. We're not taught to really dive in and ask ourselves the questions, hello, my heart, how am I really feeling? Or am I just on the hamster wheel going through this thing called life to the best of my capability, usually in a state of hyperregulation or hyperregulation at any point in time, just barely keeping it together? And I think most people on the planet are in that space. And if they're not...
So talk about why people are in that hamster wheel and in that space and can't get out of it. So if I'm not feeling well, I go to the doctor. I mean, my only option is to go to a doctor, right? And he will refer me to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or all these other things. The ancient wisdom is saying there's all these other options, meditation, breathwork. But if I've grown up in the system and I've been educated and gone through life on this planet, that's not going to make any sense to me. It's like, I'm not feeling good. How's meditating going to help my life issue now? I'm having fights with my partner. Like, what are you talking about? Or how is going and doing a mushroom ceremony or breath work? It sounds ludicrous. It makes more sense to go to a psychiatrist who's trained, certified, educated. They've got this, the credentials. They're backed by the medical system and the FDA. And this is the mindset, right? So how does somebody break that?
I just want to create some clarity here because, what you're speaking of is trigger events that inevitably would lead you into a path of needing to chat to someone, alternative healer or something. But remember, not all trigger events are, not all trigger events are going to lead you in that way. And I'm going to bring it up because it's important. But it's one of the biggest trigger events that we all have been a part of that happened recently. And that is our COVID entry time into COVID lockdowns, vaccinations. And I know this is a touchy subject, but it's a couple of years on now. So if this triggers you, ask yourself why. The point I'm trying to make is you've been speaking to trigger events, possibly needing to lead us into doing the work through alternative healing, etc., etc. Let's say, for example, we have a COVID lockdown trigger event. This may not lead you into requiring healing, right? But what it's going to do is, based on the news, based on the media, based on your family, your partner, your work colleagues, everything that you're seeing around you, these contradicting theories and hypotheses of, is it right? Is it a conspiracy theory, etc., etc. You're in information overload. So there's not something physically happening to you at the moment, but you are being triggered through mass amounts of information, as an example. And in those moments, going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist is to say, hey, is this thing real or is it not? Is the government trying to do this or is it not? It's not going to help you, right? You're going to have to sit with the self and move through a process of research and inevitably come back to base point and ask yourself, what are the values that I abide by, that I trust as a human being within my reality, that can bring me back to a space of trust, so that while I'm moving through this data, this explosion of information around me, I can sense make it, right? And the only way you can do that, like I said, is come back to a set of values that you think you would trust. So we would then ask ourselves, let's say an easy one with regards to this particular example would be, well, why is there so much chaos around it? Why are they forcing us? Why do I not have a choice? Okay. And let's say that choice point is a powerful one. And you would say, I get it, but I would like to get a little bit more data. And so you're going to sit in a research space with yourself. That research space is not meditation just yet. You may need to meditate, after 5 weeks of research and be like, what feels right to me? Ask questions, become an investigator of your reality. So again, each trigger event may not lead you into the path of healing through shamanic and alternative medicine. It more than likely will, and it can, but your trigger events, let's say again, a 16-year-old girl or an 18-year-old girl breaking up with her boyfriend for the first time, who's she going to go to? She's going to go to a group of friends or her mom, and they're going to talk these things out, It doesn't need to be this big. It's all different. It's just we've got different events where inevitably we have to come back to the self and say, hey, what do I need here? What is this showing me? Where am I in confusion? Where am I contradicting myself and therefore in cognitive dissonance? And where do I need to slow down? So again, cognitive dissonance was a huge theme around our COVID time and vaccination time. Now we've got a whole bunch of data coming out, which really helps someone that was in cognitive dissonance,
But let's cover cognitive dissonance a bit further. I mean, what is that, and how does it actually happen? So my understanding of cognitive dissonance, it's I only came across recently. I mean, with the whole COVID debacle and everything. And my understanding is that you're able to see the facts, or there's maybe facts, but you dismiss them because they don't fit in your paradigm of reality. So is that what it sort of means, or maybe you can explain it better?
Yes. So you have a set of facts, or information. And exactly as you said, it doesn't fit into your paradigm, your mental constructs, your creation, your world at that point in time. So it becomes dismissed. And essentially what it is from a higher aspect is a lie. It's a misalignment in your field. And if you were to go deeper into the self, into the core of the being, the telephone, the heart, right? That connection with God's self. And it doesn't matter what religion or what doctrines you are in, the God self exists within all of us. And we could call the God self like a bullshit meter. Within your own bullshit meter, your own truth. So a very easy example here, and it's a big example, and it's what I said I wasn't going to go into, but I may as well, because we are in these times where we need to look at these things. So anyone that gets triggered now, please know it is not my intention to do so. It is your accountability and responsibility to take to come back into the self and just look at the information and feel in your body how this is feeling. So the easiest example I can give is, people who are very religious, we would say, I trust in God. I trust in my God. God will keep me safe. God is the all-powerful, almighty decision maker and healer of it all. It is in God's hands. Essentially, what you're saying by that statement is that you are in a belief system that there is a higher power, right? Something bigger than you, something grander than you, something, an almighty protector as such, right? And you've grown up believing that because that has been your indoctrinated religion, your ancestral heritage and culture. There's nothing wrong with that. Where the dissonance comes in is we now have fear targeting us in such a direct manner, all right? And the fear is you're going to die if you don't take this thing. So, I mean, it's absolute warfare, these kind of statements, comments, and agendas, right? You're going to die if you don't take this thing. And in those moments, we forget about God. We forget about the Almighty Protector. We forget about prayer. Because what is God in the story that I'm talking about now is God is a spiritual being. It's an organic nature versus nurture kind of thing. And now you are, and many people could say, God sent us this vaccination. All right. But the dissonance is you have forgotten about the cycles, the natural cycles of life and death. You have kept it small and you've moved into fear versus love. You've moved into distrust and you're beginning to create stories that keep you safe and protected. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just trauma responses. It is coping mechanisms. And it's our will to want to live. There's nothing wrong with that either. But where we are going to, the trigger events that will continue to occur in our reality are going to be so confrontational that you better have your conversation in your own mental and spiritual and emotional and physical body up to scratch with regards to what your belief systems are of how reality works. Because when and if you do the research based on the confrontation and the amount of information, and you begin to do your research, you may see, and it is all out there, so I need not be afraid to speak of this in the now moment, but you can imagine 4 years ago when I was speaking about this, I needed to be very careful not to be ostracized out of community. Now all the facts are there. Now the Pfizers and the AstraZenecas and all of this are bringing this information to the forefront. And it was always going to be like that, but the damage is done. And like I said, it only gets more and more and more intense. Our trigger events get more and more intense where we reach a point where we're like, you know what? This is in God's hands. I would prefer to die a free soul, a free consciousness, a sovereign being than be manipulated into this fear-driven control systems that are dictating that I align further and further into agenda A, B, C, and D, which actually don't feel right to me, because like I said, I gave this example of the moment there was fear around it, we stopped asking God or maybe praying to God and saying, hey, you have given me, God, you've given me a divine body, a vessel that can heal itself of cancer, that can heal, please show me the way, show me the divine wisdom. I'm afraid of this vaccination. I don't want to take this. I don't believe in it. Something is wrong. We forgot about prayer. We forgot to begin to channel the wisdom and speak to God in this manner, and fully receive, trusting, And so this is what cognitive dissonance is what we say and what we do are completely different things. Our belief system and our actions are contradictory. And this is actually the disease on the planet at the moment, and it's purposefully confusion reigns rife in order to create confusion, so that people are in cognitive dissonance, so that it creates chaos in their nervous systems.
So I like what you said about people having to go within and find trust within themselves, I guess, and that can only come in by really doing and experiencing for yourself. So in my journey, for instance, I was having a very bad diet and I got really sick, but I didn't want to go to a medical doctor. And I consulted with a blood analyst, and she gave me a new diet. I mean, I was a bit skeptical at the time. I was like, okay, so I'm just going to eat more spinach and all these other foods, and you're going to cure me of these ailments. I mean, I was like really sick. I had some serious ailments in my body because I'd been eating such a bad diet, right? But if the cognitive dissonant part of me was very active, I would have said, no, this is rubbish. I need to go to a proper doctor and get some real medication. But anyway, I tried this diet, and it was literally just eating more spinach. And, I was vegan at the time, so it was just eating better quality proteins, like not the canned beans, but eating better cooked stuff, and then eating a nice carb. So all I did was change my diet and literally cured myself of very serious ailments. And this doctor I had on my show the other day was saying the same thing. He started a practice in Stellenbosch in the late 70s, and all he gave his patients was a good diet, and he gave them brewer's yeast, which was full of vitamin B, and he gave them kelp, which is obviously like spinach, but with more nutrients. And he cured people of diabetes and arthritis and hypertension and blood pressure and all these like severe ailments just by changing their diet. And when you hear it, you think, nah, this is rubbish. But if you experience it, and that's, I think, what the research actually requires. It's not just reading the information, but actually trying something, like going through and taking the effort and trying, okay, let me go do a meditation course, or let me go do a breathwork course and experience it for myself. These organizations and credible institutions might say this is rubbish, but let me go test it for myself and see. And I think, yeah, and I think you're going to have some bad experiences. I mean, there are charlatans and there are scams and I guess hoaxes all across the world feeding on people who are trying to go through this awakening. So I think that's important for people to know. Like, if you are going to venture into a different way of dealing with your trigger event, it's not a clear path, right? There is going to be a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, because I was going to say, essentially what it is about self-exploration, not to heal the thing. The byproduct of the self-exploration allows you to reach a state of self-empowerment. And then from there, you are back in the captain's seat of your ship, right? The byproduct of being back in the captain's seat may be the falling away of the pain, may be less suffering, may be weight loss, may be dis-ease exiting the body. But it's because the system is now back in the control seat of you, your consciousness. You are in command. And I think this is what's important to understand is, like you say, the path is not always going to be clear. And I'm going to tell you now that once you begin it is a lifelong path. And all that I urge you to do is to take it as adventurous inquiry into the self through different modalities. Play, explore. Don't come in with this aspect of skepticism and demanding results and waiting pessimistically for the whole thing to prove, to you that, it doesn't work, etc., etc. What are you learning along the way? How are you empowering yourself? And once you look at that and you begin to have the conversation with the self-actualized conversation, self-awareness, and you go, wow, actually, I've learned quite a lot on this path. I now have choice. I have choice, so at that choice point, we could say, you know what? I think I'm going to stay in this relationship because I'm now choosing to experience it from a different level of consciousness with a little bit more awareness, and I'm not quite ready to let it go yet. Amazing. You then have choice, and you've done a bit of the work, and it may take you 3 more years to get out of that relationship. But boy, oh boy, have you been exploring yourself rather than just being in the tumble dryer of the experience, completely disempowered, and not listening to the self, And each of us are different. We all have a completely different makeup, human design, etc., etc. Some people, once they have that recognition, they in no bullshit zone with themselves, and they're like, no, that person needs to go, that needs to exit, and the boundaries become strong. If you're an empath, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to set boundaries. You may see things, so the wisdom may come, but that heart, that empathic aspect of you still may struggle to set certain boundaries. And so this becomes the experience of our life. We become the experiencer. We're experiencing, and this is just when we have a little bit more of a hold on things rather than tumbling down the mountain into potential dis-ease, physical dis-ease in the body, mental dis-ease, which is going to be occurring a lot and has been on our planetary system, and spiritual dis-ease. Where do our values lie? What is this event trying to show you? Because we are in times now when we are talking about big topics. You'll see on social media more and more about people finding Jesus, people finding God. It's always been there, but it'll be more and more now. Russell Brand has just come out. He's just gone through a baptism. He's found Jesus. I'm seeing it left, right, and center. It's very, very fascinating. And so we move through deeper aspects of questioning what is important to me.
Yeah, interesting. So, what would you suggest is a safe way of navigating this unknown alternative, way of dealing with trigger events? Because it's such a huge world. I mean, since I started getting more into it, first I just thought it was yoga and meditation, but now it's there's hundreds of modalities. And what is the easiest way for people to start? Because I guess there's so many different levels of people on their spiritual journey. So there's people who are just starting out, maybe a little bit more intermediate. How would you go about it? Would you start off just by going to a ceremony?
No, I wouldn't. Each soul is going to be different. I think I would start out by guiding people to ask a friend, do you know of anyone that can assist me in this space? Don't go onto the AI. Don't do a little bit of research, but begin to collate a set of people, and I think much like our other podcast we did where I said, interview those people, ask those people questions, not only looking at websites. If someone is there to help you, you need to really feel into their energy. And so let's say you have 3, even if it is a psychologist, pick 3, have a discussion with 3 of them, begin from there, and maybe observe what fits and feels right for you, and where you can push your zone of tolerance a bit. So for example's sake, maybe traditional psychology is what your go-to would be, So if that is your go-to, stick with it, but ask 3 different psychologists, feel the energy and go from there. And then again, push your zone of tolerance while you're seeing that psychologist. Maybe pop into an art therapy class, or maybe see what alternative aspect is out there. I mean, like you say, there are hundreds. It could be art therapy. It could be an anger, rage and release session. So maybe identify the emotion. Is it absolute hopelessness? Is it excitement? Has your trigger event brought you to excitement? Maybe you've had some spiritual or mystical experience. That can be very exciting for many. So it's inspirational. You may have, met Merlin or Jesus or an angel or something. I could go very deep in here, but we're starting at the basics. So, if you've had a spiritual experience, you might need to talk to someone that deals with that and not the psychologist. So again, this is the wisdom aspect of who is the right fit for what you are looking for, and asking yourself where you are at spiritually. Are we in spirituality 101, first year of class, or are we in spirituality advanced mega level 85th dimension? Your teachers are going to change. So, and from there, once you have done your research, I bet you people who buy cars, if you're buying plane tickets, if you're spending money on yourself, you research. You're looking at the map. You're using your cognitive ability and your sense making to design a trip for yourself. And yet we don't do that when it comes to our mental health and our emotional health. So design something for yourself. Ask friends. Do you know of anyone? Do you feel this is right? And of course, we have our social media networks, YouTube, where we can learn a lot. There's Teal Swan, Jordan Peterson. It depends what your topic is. There's a lot of amazing people out there. And again, like I said, in spirituality level 185,000, you're going to start changing your tune. But in the beginning, move into a space of exploration. I think this would be the most valid aspect, is to not be so hard on yourself. Just go, okay, cool. A challenge has presented itself. I will rise to the challenge in a playful and wise way to assist myself. And so I'm going to pick to go to badminton 3 times a day to move or 3 times a week to move the energy. I just needed, or I'm going to buy a puzzle. Instead of being online, I'm going to work on a puzzle in the evening. There's 100 million ways. But it's noticing the emotion, dedicating yourself to inquiring about this emotion, and from there, follow the white rabbit.
I think what I took out of that is really to take the power back into your own hands for such an important aspect of your life, your own mental health, your own emotional health, and your own physical health, right? Like really take the power back, empower yourself to do the work and to figure out the path. Like, just like you said, if you're buying a car or making a big investment, generally you're going to do some research and spend the time, look at different cars and go to different dealerships. So the same applies to your your body and your emotions, your well-being, right? So you go and do the research and do the reading, go meet multiple people, and then your intuition, can kick in if you allow it and are able to listen. It will kick in and guide you to a way. And I think that's really what people need to do. And that's maybe the message out of this is trigger events are there to guide you and help you and show you what you need to deal with, and you then need to take the power back into your own hands and do the work. And COVID, you mentioned, it was a big awakening trigger event globally, because so many people then immediately took the research into their own hands and said, hey, this doesn't make sense, I need to research it myself, or I need to talk to other experts and get other opinions.
Mm, mm. And the thing I wanted to mention here is about, you said, trigger events are this, it's something that's showing you, but what it's also asking of you is to create time for yourself in order to do the research, to come up with the mind map and the plan, to come to a space of decisive action. And then you simultaneously mentioned COVID immediately. And what did COVID provide us during lockdown? Time. We would not have had the depth of reflection without the time that we had during lockdown. And some people, that would have driven them crazy, because we're used to this fast-paced thing that allow us to suppress everything else, to just be in that cube hamster wheel dynamic, producing and succeeding and all of this. So for some, we're like, oh, we really needed this time. Others, that time would have been a deafening silence for them, because what are we doing when we have time? Is we have time to sit with the self. So I think time is also a very important one, to create the time for yourself. There was a word used in the beginning. I can't remember. Allowing these experiences, these events in one's life to become something that we focus on, that we give the time, the space, and the effort, because we value ourselves, we are important, and our mental health, our well-being, our experience on this planet, is for something. And it's so interesting, because I had an argument with someone, not an argument, a beautiful debate with someone who didn't quite believe in reincarnation, but has had not the worst experience comparatively to other people on this planet, but had a pretty tough traumas, right? And I just said, to me, we have such a vast planet, it seems absurd to me that you would only have one life of, let's call it 85 years, where a lot of it was in suffering. I just, knowing that the Earth has been moving around the solar system for eons, that you and your consciousness only got to experience Earth for 85 years. It's bizarre to me. Anyway, what I'm saying is, we're on this planet to receive its nectar. And we can only receive that when we step out of the cube, And the nectar is self-knowing, self-knowledge, recognition of the one, the God self.
So maybe let's touch on the planet as we close off this discussion. Like, you started off saying the planet is going through these changes, and that is maybe accelerating, right? The trigger events that people are getting and be playing a big part. So what's actually happening to our planet, and why?
Well, let's I don't like to create separation, but for to answer this, let's create a separation. The planet is Earth. we don't really need to worry about her. Yes, we've got climate change and all of these things, but she is a grand master of a being and consciousness. She will do precisely what she needs to do. So let's park that. But it's the beings on the planet that are really in a race for control. And I'm going to keep this as succinct and simple as possible because we'll probably dive into it a little deeper in other sessions. But we have a set of beings on the planet that are diving deeper and deeper for aspects of control, for resources, and it's how their consciousness wishes to explore based on the fact, based on their reptilian nature, their DNA, and their fear, really. Their fear that while these supercharged frequencies are coming into the planet to shift the planetary consciousness, that their dominion and domain begins to fall. And that is what is happening. So again, in the beginning, I said our trigger events may be seen as something negative, disruptive, chaotic in our lives. But in actual fact, we need to reframe and to go, wow, this is only bringing me closer to God, myself, my intuition, my empowered state of being. Much the same is happening on the planetary scale, where these agendas through these controllers are moving through a fear space. And what happens when people are in fear is we scramble for power. We scramble with stories and lies and manipulation and distraction and disruption. And it's just holding on, for dear life, so to speak. Because through the planetary shift, Earth shift, we are moving, we are grooving, and we're bringing higher frequencies in. And so it all is a kind of rat race at the moment for holding on. And if you look at the basic spiritual teachings, the basics, but profound basics, is attached to nothing. Expect nothing, judge nothing, non-expectation, non-judgment, non-attachment. Be in the present moment because there is only ever a now, and be in unconditional love. That is the Christ consciousness, so we can watch these agendas and control mechanisms, and we need to be observant of why they are happening. So I've just given that reason. It's a scramble for control. And observe simultaneously as new systems create, because I don't know about you, but for me, I don't wish to be controlled. And so I hope that answers the question efficiently without diving deep into conspiracy theories, agendas, and reptilian galactic conversation.
We might cover that in future episodes as we go through this series of discussions with Brigitte. So this particular discussion was about trigger events. I really think we covered it in quite a lot of depth. There is a lot to be aware of as people around the planet are experiencing lots of trigger events as the planet is going through all these great changes. And as we all are being shown this great mirror to help us release our charged emotions, right? And to integrate and to align. And that's, I think, the whole purpose of this. We're being pushed to align to the planet and the greater energies. And this is a really great opportunity. I mean, when else are we going to have so much learning opportunity, compressed into such a short space of time? I don't think this planet has been through this kind of awakening in so long, right? And that's why we're talking about this great awakening, because it's so many people are going to be awakening in such a short space of time. It's really something special.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is. It's bizarre, unique, terrifying, and spectacular all at the same time. And, I guess, like I said, do your research in who's going to help you, because you will need help. We're moving through this together. And yeah, I wish you just beautiful blessings on your journey, and a state of surrender and trust in yourself. Come back to your power, come back to your power.
So, Brigitte, this was an excellent, excellent overview of a very interesting and important topic. And we look forward to the next episode in this series.
Yes,
Till then,
beautiful.
stay well.
Thank you, Deepak.